Alright guys, we're going to start up round 2. Gilles, who's AWS. Gilles.
Gilles. Gilles.
Giles, no.
The proper pronunciation is Gilles.
Gilles. Like Villeneuve. Jack's Villeneuve. Anyway. Over to you. Go for it. Thanks everyone.
Good evening everyone. Thank you for being here tonight, and thanks to the team at AWS for inviting me. I'm going to talk tonight about the recent events that most of us have experienced at AWS with AWS. About a month ago, actually, well, this was the anniversary of the first data center failure yesterday. So very pleased to share with you how we lived the outage, how we experienced it, and then give you a few tips, hopefully, and a few takeaways that you can bring back to your organization. So a few words about me. I'm Gilles Bayet. I give a t-shirt for someone who can say my name in full properly. I don't have any t-shirt on me, but I don't think I take much risk here. Like the guy who broke it, yeah, I think he could win the t-shirt. Anyway, I'm the Cloud Center of Excellence Manager for a financial institution based at Circular Quay in Sydney. That should give you a pretty good idea which financial institution it is. I'm leading a team of 5 DevOps engineers. 3 of them are here tonight. I didn't force them, I promise. As Darren mentioned, I'm on the dark side of DevOps. I'm doing ops. AWS certified, who gives it? I'm a fan of DevOps, AWS, data pipeline for those who were at the last meetup last month. And now Lambda, awesome. It's been we've been waiting for Lambda for a very long time, and it finally came last month. So really pleased. I'm working on an environment that aims at automating everything, as my boss said, the crap out of everything. So basically, my company did a lift and shift from traditional data center to AWS 3 years ago. So we now have 40% of our production workload running in AWS, which is quite massive in production. About 9 months ago, they decided to make a step even further and take all the benefits of AWS and its tools like auto-scaling, auto-healing, and so on, transformation. So everything has to be, if you want to come into my world, you have to be ready to automate everything. If something cannot be automated, you back off, you stay in your own world. Excuse my French. For those who haven't recognized my accent yet, I'm very French.
I think we worked that out.
You never know. I got Swedish, I got German, I got Danish, lots of stuff. And with the French comes good food and good drinks at the table. And I'm almost married to this beautiful lady. I'm flying back to France in 2 weeks, so I'll be away for a month. So you won't see me at the next meetup, I promise. Thanks, David. And I'm a travel addict. You can meet me at several meetups, connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's have a little poll. Who is aware about the difference between pets and cattle? Raise your hand. Oh, that's not so many. So who does not know the difference between cattle and pet?
Everybody else.
Okay. There were a few hands not raised, so I'm quite confused. In short, pets are nurtured. If they are sick, you need to take care of them and fix them. They are manually deployed. With servers, whereas cattle are if they get sick, you just turn them away, get another one, and off we go.
Not a good business model, really.
And cattle are awesome. We'll see shortly why cattle are really awesome. Before we start, I don't know if you know, some of you may know, but AWS applies some randomization on AZ. So AZA for our customer might not be the same physical data center as AZA for another customer. In our case, all our AZs are aligned in production and non-production, and this is quite an important because basically all our instances in AP services 2A went down on the 5th of June. But that's really cool if you have low latency application that you want to make sure, for example, your database and your server, which are seated in different AWS accounts, are actually in the same physical data center. Talk to your TAM and he'll be able to arrange something for you. So now let's move on to the chain of events. So that's information publicly available. You can go to this page and you will find all the details. So in short, at 3:25 p.m. on that Sunday, happy Sunday, there was a loss of power at the regional substation. The power was restored about an hour and 20 minutes after. By 6 p.m., AWS had recovered almost all its services, and at 1 a.m., all instances were recovered. I got the same experience from my employer's perspective, really. 3:25, all monitoring went crazy. Conference bridge was open. All the guys on call were gathered in this bridge, including AWS. They were with us. We'll see that a bit later. By 5:30, 2 hours later, all services were restored. Not bad, but not so good. And we worked until 3 a.m. to restore absolutely all services. So this is what I assimilate as a black swan event. I don't know if you've heard of the black swan, but that's the thing that people think they don't exist up until the day you actually face a black swan. And for a little bit of the story, it comes from the 1700s, where people assumed that all black swans were white, and there was an expression, oh, it's a black swan, say something couldn't exist, up until the time they traveled to Western Australia and they discovered that black swan actually exists. So that's for a bit of a story, and Caleb took it and popularized it in basically management, to describe the impact of the highly improbable in this book. So now, for something more interesting, what did we experience during the outage? First, all services running in AZA went down. Some autoscaling group process didn't kick off. They showed terminated instance and new instance launched. But the terminated instance were still running and the launched instance weren't. Or maybe they were, but we were a bit blind because of inability to see anything in the EC2 console or via the CLI. We had our own black swan event as well. I remember at 3:25 power outage, everything in AZA went down. We had a service running on 3 servers, 2 in AZA and 1 in AZB. There was a standby server in AZB. Why it was in standby, I don't know. But at 3:26, 1 minute after the power outage, we had a NIC failure on the only server that was left to serve customer requests. Hooray! The instance restarted properly, moved to a different hardware, and for 20 minutes, the ELB didn't send health checks. Remember, we are in the healthy AZ, or not in the failed one. So, worked with AWS. After 20 minutes, the ELB started sending health checks again, and the instance didn't come back in the ELB. We had the health check configured at 5 seconds, and the TLS client timeout on Red Hat is 5 seconds by default. And our first resolver was unavailable. If you know where I'm going to, basically our instance were returning to us check in 5-ish seconds. The ish was a bit too much. So that was one big impact. It could have been pretty seamless, but this one was big for my organization. We also noticed that some CloudWatch metrics were lying, showing no healthy instances in ELBs where the ELB was saying, oh, X out of X instances healthy. All right. And as many organizations, we had some products that were relying on a single service, like the single domain controller, LDAP server. Those services didn't really cope well with the loss of their only domain controller, for example. After the outage, at 3 AM, this wasn't over yet. The next day, we had to leave like a database repair and integrity check running for 4 days. The CRM database, pretty bad. We had to restore data stored on ephemeral storage, cheap, but when this happened, it's not cheap anymore. Cost a bit. 24 hours fixing instances in lower environment, clean up rogue instances I mentioned earlier. Autoscaling group were not able to terminate some instances, so we had to actually terminate them manually because they were not existing for anyone. On the bright side, something worked very well.
Hooray!
Hooray! Health check, ELB health check, flagged the instances as unhealthy and triggered the processes in the autoscaling group. RDS database failed over correctly. The database I mentioned before was EC2, a database running on EC2. So yeah, some takeaways here. Autoscaling group worked. Some autoscaling group processes worked, and we were actually able to spin up instances in the healthy AZ. AWS support escalation. A big thank you to AWS for the help they provided during the whole duration of the outage. Like within a couple of minutes, they were with us on the call and giving us some information. We were quite blind. And all critical services running in my environment. Cloud2 is the environment that we manage, and that's pretty awesome. I find I was helping the other teams fixing their problem, but at least not my team fixing our infrastructure. So the lesson learned. Well, there was some discrepancies between the implementation of our services and the design that we originally drew. So some work currently happening around that. Instance type definitely matters. Don't jump on the most modern instance type because they are really in demand, they are really fashionable, and basically you run out of, AWS runs out of capacity for those instances much more quicker than older version of instances. AWS Enterprise, where's the cost if you can afford it? Again, without AWS we probably wouldn't have been back up and running in 2 hours. We were completely blind, so that was really where they were helping a lot. It's telling us what was happening from the console, how many EC2 instances were in our ELBs, what was the state of our instances, etc. Cattle are awesome. I told you I was going that way. Pets, no more. I wouldn't go back to a pet world. I love pets, I love dogs, but when I wake up in the morning, I love taking care of cattle. Look at this happy farmer. It's like me on the 5th of June. Data center in Sydney are not weatherproof. I've seen much worse weather in all my travels, and I've never heard of a data center not coping with so much rain. So maybe some work to do on the infrastructure in Sydney. Hundreds of companies were impacted, so we weren't alone, which is always reassuring to know that you are not alone. What's next? As I mentioned, discrepancies between design and implementation, we really want to fix them and make sure we are resilient in case of a failure. Use older instance type, not jump on fashionable implement instances. So when a failure of an AZ occurs, there is capacity in the other AZ for us to spin up our instances. Use Chaos Monkey more often. Test those kind of situations and make sure our services are actually as resilient as we think they are. Turn pet into cattle, I insist. It dragged a lot of work for my team. Like it's been a month since it has happened, and we've got 5 or 6 applications who are looking at us to help them build their automation from the ground up. So from spinning up their infrastructure to have a service up and running. So lots of work. Deploy new VPCs across 3 AZ. The third AZ was out in February or something, I think.
Yeah, recently.
Yeah.
How many is using 3 AZs now? Yeah.
Well done, guys. We aren't yet, but we will. Unfortunately, our design didn't cater for it, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge to rebuild our VPCs, migrate our application, etc. Not too much in terms of deploying. It's easy. It's all code. But in a financial institution, you have to go around all the hoops and firewalls, proxies, etc. Revisit our DNS client TTL versus else check timeout. I mentioned the most impactful event that happened was the NIC failure, not the database, the availability zone failure, which is a shame. We didn't cater for it. The standby instance has been added as an active instance since. We had the license to run it, but we didn't. Who decided that? Probably isn't in a part of the organization anymore. We are also we were working quite a lot with AWS after the outage to review the log, understand the chain of event a bit better, especially around this ELB who wasn't sending a health check and then sending a health check but not receiving a correct response in a timely fashion. So and they've admitted that they had a few hiccups on their end as well, which I'm not allowed to share more details with you about tonight because of an NDA. But yeah, they promised that they are fixing it. It should already be fixed, I believe. We will never know, hopefully. But yeah, that's
until it rains again.
I'll be gone by next year then. And that's it. Thank you for listening, and if you have any question,
Questions?
yeah, Jason.
Hey, one of the things I haven't been able to get a clear answer for, because you mentioned DNS, I'm curious on the specifics. Some people on Twitter were saying that DNS resolution wasn't working for a while in the working availability zones. And then you said that you needed to go to your second DNS resolver on the list. Was that an Amazon resolver that was the first one that was failing, or what was the?
No. As you know, when you configure a DHCP option set, you just put Amazon DNS.
Yeah.
That's what we do. Maybe you can actually figure out the IPs, but so we don't really know the IPs until we go on the box. Now that was our resolvers F5 QIP. The first resolver was in AZA, so yeah. 5 seconds, Red Hat, remember that, important.
Learning curve. So the incident report that came out, did you think it was useful? Has everybody read the incident report and see how they dealt with it, how they followed through? Like when you look at if you worked in data centers and you understand the complexity of a data center, to read how they kind of outlined the issue, how they approached it, what they're going to do for mitigation in the future, I think it was well laid out in how they approached the problem and were transparent in saying what wasn't working or what was done wrong and how they're going to fix it. So, well done.
Yeah, I think the paper was informative. Most of us would have been very frustrated by reading this paper. I was like, nah, this can't be it. Give us more detail. Come on, guys. We don't know if it's a shared data center, if it's an AWS dedicated data center. We don't know who is responsible to fix it. There is a lot of unknowns behind it. But it's AWS, so you have to trust what they tell you. They don't give much information.
You mentioned you had some issue with auto scaling groups. Some worked, some didn't. Can you share some more detail about that?
Sure. So it's a very good question. It actually relates to.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry.
Or you just.
So I mentioned that some auto-scaling processes worked and some didn't. And the question was, can you give a bit more detail about why some did work and why some didn't work? I think there is a combination of two things. The last point is one, and the instance type that I mentioned, second point, is the second one. So when in our auto-scaling group we had we were using, for example, an M3 medium, it worked well. When we were using an M4 large, it didn't work well. And also we noticed that a lot of API calls didn't get processed successfully by AWS, and they've confirmed that one of their problems, without giving it too much detail, one of their problems was a huge queue of API calls. So everyone not being able to see its instances, clicking refresh. That was each of the refresh were one API call queuing on the AWS side of things. So that didn't help either. And that's something they promised to fix. Yes, sorry.
So that's a fairly old problem. The past outages, the control plane has always been.
We need wireless. Wireless doesn't exist, does it?
In past outages, the control plane has always been weak point. Specifically, they don't design for failure, or you get instances like you're describing, and everybody's trying to find out what's going on. There isn't capacity in the control plane.
Yeah, you design your system to serve your customer before serving yourself.
I guess if you think about it at a high level and go, right, okay, just say you have two data centers and you have a low latency link between them, and you go, one of them fails, what's going to happen? Everything over here is going to generate a lot of traffic that's going to have to traverse the control plane to get to the other side. How does it do it? Where is your bottleneck going to be? It's going to be at that bottleneck of your latency network. So I can imagine the amount of queuing of stuff in that control plane was going to be huge, and then you see the trickle to come back through over time. Which, when you looked at the status reports as it was happening, you could see that the problem was moving around between the services, and then you had APIs were building up and up and up. The queue was building up, and then as it kind of started to subside, and all the other service members eventually kind of fixed themselves. So.
But AWS mentioned to us that it was designed, like the control plane was designed to cope with the load. There was just something wrong in their design. So, yeah, it should have coped. We shouldn't have been blind in seeing our EC2 instances and what the state of them were.
I just wanted to know why the AWS data center didn't have a diesel backup generator.
It did. Like every data center, it's powered by two different grids, and there is a huge bunch of batteries. As you know, a diesel generator doesn't start like in a blink of an eye. It's not like spinning the wheel on your car and off you go.
I think it's a 1-ton centrifugal wheel. It's this massive big wheel that's made of like, weighs about a ton, and what it does, it switches between the power, the phase power, and the DC power, and it kind of seamlessly moves it. If you read the report, that's what it says, and that it drained slowly, it didn't quickly flick all the switches, which is why it kind of got stuck.
Yeah, there was really a black swan even.
Good old black swans.
Yeah, good old ones.
Sounds like there was a flock of black swans.
Big flag of them. Yes.
There was a few black swans that day.
I've worked through a couple of data center outages around Australia, and I've never seen something go wrong by itself. Trouble always has friends.
Yeah.
Swiss cheese effect.
Yeah. Cool. Any more questions? No?
Maybe the last one from you.
Sure.
So, have you got any ideas how to execute some code simulation of such outage? Given our important question, would you be willing to perform such simulation?
So the question was, is there any tool that can
Tools or whatever, how to execute.
so is there a way to reproduce or to simulate this kind of event?
Yes, Gorilla do data center failures, but not zone failures. So it's, I think so. Kind of is the answer.
Kind of, yeah. And will I be willing to use these tools? Definitely. Definitely not in production. Again, like my the core principle of my team is that you don't deploy any code in production that is not exactly the same as pilot and non-production. So you have to go through the whole SDLC. So for me and for the service I'm delivering through the cloud, if I'm confident that I simulate a failure in pilot and I simulate a failure in non-prod, then I'm pretty resilient. I'm pretty sure prod is not going to fail. Something I forgot to mention is coupled application are a beast. Like loose coupling, kill switches, things that allows you to gracefully have a service recover from the failure of another service is super important. I don't underestimate the power of decoupling your application. We've seen in so many outages like something that no one gives a fuck really.
Reduce the attack surface, basically. or the failure surface, so
Like, you know, like
less people notice.
Netflix does that very well. They give you a recommendation. Oh, we suggested that for you. This is a microservice. If it's not available, Netflix still works. You just don't see like what Netflix recommended for you, and that's where we've been failing. Some like really subsidiary application, like things that the customer don't really care about, makes the whole thing fail, the whole application fail, and that's really bad. And that's where we have a lot of improvement.
How often do you implement your DR and BCP plan? Everybody writes it, but has anybody ever implemented one in the last quarter? Well done. Well done, well done.
Did it work?
Actually, so to stop for a second, that actually deserves like a standing ovation.
I agree.
Because even from an ADC perspective, when I have customers that get on the phone and say, "Seb, one outage and your stuff didn't work," and we say, "What happened when you tested it?" and they go, "Oh, we didn't test it." So seriously, well done, guys. Not last quarter. It's scheduled on the strategic action plan, I'm sure.
No, of course, testing. Like,
Excellent. Any more questions? No.
sorry?
Financial costs for the business.
Sorry, I can't share any information about my company.
But we can definitely tell you it was a number.
I can tell you how much we got from AWS. I think it was about I don't know, 30 grand, I think. They basically look at our bill, monthly bill, and they divided that like they did a pro rata with the number of hours we were down, and they refund the money. So
Cool.
and without asking, like they just took that on by themselves.
It's going to be a flurry of calls to AWS tomorrow.
Bills are on me tonight.
Thanks you very much. Thanks, Julian. Thank you very much. Awesome.